realities of people living the creator dream and help aspiring creators turn their dream into reality. I am your host, Jasmine Love, and today we have an amazing guest, Jeri Howitt, the author of children's books A Tale of Two Loves and Shay the Rat Lives in the New York Metropolitan Museum. She's also been published in several publications, and she is the founder of Stories on Stage Davis, which is now in its 10th season. Jeri, welcome to the show. And even though we can't hear you, show Jeri some love. Go, Jeri. Go, Jeri.
Yay.
Yes. Thank you for coming, Jeri. I'm so happy to I'm so happy to have you here.
Good. I'm happy to be able to share whatever I have.
Yes, you definitely have wisdom. You are accomplished as a creator. Yeah, let's jump into our first segment. Okay. I call it content sponging. As creatives, we have to read a lot, watch a lot to, spark our creative ideas. And I think of the brain as a sponge or subconscious that soaks up inspiration. So I'm curious, what are you sponging on lately? What are you reading, listening to, watching?
For me, when I watch TV, to just use empty brain. But for me, in connection with writing, reading is really, really critical. And I know that I just finished critiquing somebody who said they want to submit to get into an MFA program. And it was a very quiet piece. And I recommended a story in, I don't know if you've ever read Edward Jones in Lost in the City, but he is truly, I read his, it's just a collection of short stories, and I read them probably once a year. Anyway, so I got out to make sure I had the title right of the short story I was recommending, called The First Day. And then I kept reading. He is so amazing. And I felt good because before he was dauntingly amazing.
Nice. And what do you like about his writing? Like, what makes it so amazing?
I am very character driven. And he has very, First Day is about a little girl who has a glorious relationship with her mother. And she's first day of kindergarten. And for the first time in her life, she sees how other people see her mother. That's a story arc. That's just darn good writing to get that across. And he's so descriptive. I mean, he describes her underwear. They have Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday on them. Well, each pair has that. And it's just, he's an amazing writer. Amazing writer. Anyway, and so I find that reading other people's works is inspirational.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Awesome. And would you say that was the most recent piece you read that left an impression on you?
Well, I read him about once a year, but yes, I just literally read it yesterday.
Awesome. Very cool.
Rereading his book for this year's reread. But
what was the title again?
Pardon?
What was the title again, in case people want to look it up?
It's Edward Jones, and it's called Lost in the City. And it's a series of short stories. I'm going to guess 10, 15 at the most. And the particular story that I had recommended to this person was The First Day. And also the title page of Lost in the City, the gal is a very successful lawyer. Her mother dies in the hospital. And she's just kind of re-examining her whole life. That's the story. Just takes tremendous amount of talented writing to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like a combination. I've never read it at all, but it sounds very literary, but children. So it's like actual literature, not like this sing-songy.
It's literary fiction. Yeah. I think he's gotten the Penn Hemingway Awards. I don't know if he's gotten a Pulitzer. I'm not sure. He's a very well-known. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's move on to our next segment, A Day in the Life of the Creator, where we explore how our creators got to where they are today and what a typical day in their working life looks like. So I am super curious, Jeri, when you were a teenager or a young adult, did you always know you wanted to be a fiction writer, or did you have other plans?
Never occurred to me to be a writer. I think it was in the 7th grade. I had a crush on my science teacher. To this day, I have shock and awe on science. And I mean, to me, it's just quite amazing. That's what I proceeded to do is I did research and things like that. And I don't know how I got, anyway, I ended up tutoring. I live in an academic town. The University of Davis so we're a one horse town, academics. And so I ended up tutoring AP chemistry students because they had a terrible teacher, just terrible, terrible, terrible. So I ended up tutoring them. And then I got at this place, and then I got looking around, and I got kind of interested in the concept of teaching, and I have fun when I teach them, and so people would ask me to do different things, and I got interested in reading. And I came up with ways of teaching reading that basically could beat every remedial reading teacher in town. And these Down syndrome adults asked if I would teach them to read. And I have all these games. For example, if you take a vowel, A-E-I-O-U, sometimes Y, and you put an R after it, it makes one sound. Like A-R is the pirate sound. R, me matey, R, like so sharp. Sh, R, P. There's only 3 sounds. And so I used that, and I'd play games and things like that with them so that they began to learn how to break down words because the whole language was their way of doing it. Anyway, and so you can't make adults read, see Jane run, run Jane run. So I began to read comic books with them. And I mean, I at one point knew Batman's butler's name. And those are rather good storylines. They're very well written, not as literature, but very well written. They grab your attention. And then they backtrack and they fill in the characters. And then they move forward with the action. And they have, all the vocabulary words of rising tension and all of that. And so when I finally sat down and decided to try to write something, I actually already had intuitively picked up how to create a story. Now, science was
from the comics?
From the comic books, believe it or not, because I had read so many comic books with these adults. And there were all sorts of things. Oh, writing is difficult. And for example, in a science background, you use the passive voice. You never use, oh my gosh. So I had to beat myself to death to get the passive voice out of my head. The idea, you get in there, you work. And so I did a lot of reading. I'd take notes on a story I liked, trying to figure out how they were doing it, what it was I liked about it. And we're talking about quite a few years here. I mean, it didn't happen overnight. It was pretty good. And so, no, I never thought to go into writing. Never occurred to me. But I enjoyed it.
So it found you through the natural course of your life and following your natural interests.
I love it. It found me. Exactly. It did find me. Yes.
Nice. And so how long have you been writing now? How many years?
Oh, it's probably been about 20 years now. Because I started before I retired. And I ended up in what I call my adult writing, not porn. I call it my adult writing to distinguish it from my children's writing. That I accidentally slipped into the adult writing because a very nice publishing agency was interested in Che the Rat, lives in the New York Metropolitan Museum, because there was quite a few stories on that. But they said they were not used to an unknown. They were nervous about an unknown author in that genre, which was young adult or very young children. And they said, would you write in middle grade and young adult? And that's how I went into literary fiction and started doing that. And then every once in a while, I'd enjoy writing a children's book. It's fun. And I have such a different personality in my children's books. I'm a little dark in my adult stuff, but I have a 4th grade sense of humor in children's books.
Nice. And it sounds like you have so much fun with it. Walk me through a typical day. Like, say you're working on a book, say it's a children's book. So you're starting a children's book or in the middle of the process. What's a normal working day look like? When do you wake up, and do you have a morning routine, first of all?
What I find is that I block out a segment of where I actually find reading kind of begins to funnel my brain into thinking. So I'll actually sit and read for an hour. I have paper and pencil next to me. If I find a word, I just find, oh, I love that word. That's an interesting word. I'll write it down. If something gets stimulated, I'll actually sit down and handwrite out maybe a paragraph of something I've been working with on the previous time. And I don't pay attention to how long I do it, because some days you're better than others. But you haven't talked about my stories on stage part yet, well, very much. But when I was the director for the first 3 years of its life, I talked to all the authors
Mhm.
about how, kind of what you're asking. They all wrote. And I call it the Nike, just do it. That's the old Nike slogan, just do it. And they would sit down, and we had John Lasquale, we presented once. He's a mystery writer. And he said he went to his office and he spent 4 hours in his office. I don't think I could do 4 hours. I could bet I could. I bet I don't put in more than 2 hours. And it's just my observation is that if you go every day and you work at it, I mean, hey, nobody's going to kill you if you miss a day. But if you're generally very precious about going and doing it, your brain is working when you're not sitting in front of your material. And your brain goes and solves it. And the next time I sit down, I'll go, oh, I think I have an idea.
But
And I find that nibble, 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 one foot in front of the other really is, and that's what my friend who was a chemical engineer in art, that's what she found. She says a lot of her art friends would wait for inspiration. And she says, no, you just sit down and do it every day. And she says, when I finish a picture, if I don't like it, I move on to the next one. And she says, I realize I'm just working. And she is a professional artist now. She's making her living.
well,
Just
let's
like
talk about the just do it and the nibbling away. So, what do you do? You can speak on what you do or the authors you've talked to
right.
when it's time to write and you don't feel like it. You don't have the inspiration, or you're feeling blocked or resistant, or you're just feeling, oh, I don't want to write, but I need to write, but I don't want to write. How do you get through that?
One of the things that I have found is that, my gosh, the toilet needs to be clean, sings to you if you're not really in the mood to write. And I mean, it's just got to be dealt with immediately, right? And then on to the next thing. And I find place is very important. And in talking with a lot of authors, some of them, it's quite interesting. Some of them will actually put like some sort of a smell and incense or something. Some of them will
Mhm.
put on music in the background. Some of them will turn all the lights off and then just have a spotlight on their working area. They all seem to have place in kind of a little ritual where I have an office above the that I go to, and when I'm in there, it's the argument is getting up the stairs to my office.
Mhm.
Once I'm there, my mind kind of knows, okay, this is where we work on writing, and I think that
Yeah,
ritual of just do it and don't worry about what I accomplish. Some people said they worked X number of words. Well, that doesn't work for me. And some people work X number of hours. I just figure when I'm running around in circles mentally, then I might as well stop. I'm not accomplishing much.
awesome. Love to hear it. Now, let's talk about stories on stage, Davis. Back when you were running that, what did a typical, I'm assuming maybe it happened at night, but what did a typical day or night of running one of those shows look like?
Well, it it's hard on, hard off. I'm very glad not to be the director, but the directors have all clung to me because when we if we have an overflow audience, I know where the extra chairs are, and in the end, I always get dragged into to helping find authors, and that's actually my title now is I'm the what they call the author coordinator, which means you read a lot of books and try to figure out if this because we hire an actor to actually read what we choose because not every author is a good reader and don't really want to tell people I can't read very well. So we actually pay an actor to read. And as our reputation has grown, it's gotten easier because I know the authors are going to usually say yes because we've had some pretty significant authors. And I don't know what, and one of the reasons I think I end up doing it is you can say no to me. It's okay. I won't be upset. And so I have the courage to approach people. And most of the people, they've said yes. And we've had some pretty amazing people. And then having a group keeps you from wearing out. So we have people who do our newspaper articles, our podcasts, our things like that. And now what I do is I do all the reading, go to the events, of course, and then I get to host a lot of the authors if they're coming from a distance. So that's kind of fun. I get
Oh,
to talk
nice.
with them.
That
And
is fun.
it's interesting, and that's where I've always felt that Nike "Just Do It" was the right slogan for any creative field. I don't care if you're an academic. And it's interesting. My son is, he's a cell physiologist, immunologist. And when he talks about his research, I don't know if he's been around me for too long, but he'll say, well, the data has to tell a story. And if the story isn't complete, something's missing, you need to go back and figure out why. And I thought, yay, that's creativity. It is telling a story, whether it's in a picture, whether it's science, whether it's writing.
That is so awesome. And now tell me, because you've done a lot of reading, writing, you do the event. Do you have, after doing all that, whatever the day calls for, whether it's an event day or a reading or writing day, do you have a night routine? What do you do to end off the day and switch over to the end of your day?
I love trash TV. I will actually, my husband says I can't say this to you. I'll actually watch Judge Judy. um, it's like, oh, this is, and I have to confess, I'm also a news junkie. But I'll watch Judge Judy at the end of the day because it's like, oh, of course he thought you gave him the money. Yeah, of course. You're right. Right. You're on. You're a $10 an hour worker, and you lent him $2,000, or you gave it to him. Yeah. Anyway, it's sort of a different world that it just sort of day's done, unwind, and I don't read very much in the evening. Interestingly, I it's kind of like my downtime.
Yeah. Awesome. We're similar. If I read in the morning, and at night I watch the late shows, the satire
Yeah.
shows, and news and things
Brain,
like that.
emptying your brain of total. I think that's the secret. Is if you, well, I guess if you get pretty intense, you do get better faster. But I don't know. One has a life,
Yeah.
and
Well,
I'm not worried about getting a Pulitzer Prize for literature. So I think it's important if I'm going to keep at something that's as ambiguous as writing, that I need to keep my what I call my mojo up. That I can do this,
yes.
I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that is actually really important. I want to highlight that because my word of, we're recording this in 2023, my word of 2023 is sustainability, because I tend to be really intense and I come in at a 10 and then I burn out and then like fall off and like don't finish the project or like whatever. So I'm trying to learn to go slower and steadier and have sustainability. So yeah, I like
Yeah,
your
yeah.
approach.
My attitude is, if your dream is to go to the moon, study how to make rockets. Don't worry about the moon.
Mm.
And I think that's kind of my philosophy. I could spend half an hour on one page just trying to figure, especially in the math part, just trying to figure out what was going on. I think that's what my friend, the chemical engineer friend who went into art, once a year we'll talk about our progress and stuff. And we both say, don't wait for inspiration. Just sit down and slowly do it. And you've got to put the energy into studying what you're doing and studying good writing, figuring out why something works. Like Edward Jones, I've taken notes on his short stories, trying to figure out what is it he is doing
Mm-hmm.
that is captivating me, because I think I have a style of writing that's similar to his, and I'm not going to be an action-packed, knock 'em dead type of writer. I would never be a mystery writer, for example. I'm too character driven. And that's how I
Yeah.
think when I got into children's things, children's stories are easier. And I would actually take a character, like a little girl. And one of the I haven't bothered to do anything with it, but I have a story where the little girl has these red ribbons. And I'm going to put her in another story, but I wanted to see who she was. So I decided to send her down to a river with a crocodile in it who wants her red ribbons. And then I wrote a little story. I'll do backstories, like on two characters. I wrote their family history. I mean, we're not talking a long one, but it was a page each. And it's trying to, because I'm so character driven and I know that about myself. And so I would never attempt to write fiction. I mean, I would never try to attempt to write
Mystery.
mystery type, action type thing.
Or action adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it's not in me.
Yeah, and that is very insightful, like to know your lane. I've actually struggled with this as a writer. Like, I am better at nonfiction. I've written fiction, I've published fiction and gotten decent reviews, but I just no, I'm just much better at information nonfiction, but I'm not where you're at yet in accepting it. I keep like looking over at fiction writers and like pining for that and wishing I was at, but my gift is nonfiction. So I like where you're at and I'm learning from you to just be like, okay, this is my skill set. This is what inspires me. This is what I'm good at. And that's okay. Like, I don't have to write action adventure. I'm character driven. Or in my case, I don't have to write fiction right now. I can just do nonfiction. So I'm not there yet, but I'm trying to get there.
You see, I think nonfiction is really the same thing. Especially if you read really good nonfiction, you're involved in the characters at such a depth of, and bad nonfiction gets really linear, and very pedantic and very boring. Whereas if a good nonfiction, I think, is a work of art. I really do. And you have a few constraints. You can't put a crocodile in your story. But other than that, there's it's how you lay it out that is so exciting. And there's always, if you're telling a nonfiction, there's always characters. I remember somebody wrote a very pedantic story about some cross-country biking. And he was talking about this gal who made some sort of pants, shorts or something for him. I guess had a lot of padding or something for bike riding. And she was such a character. And I said, she's a chapter. Oh, well, she just made the shorts. I said, no, she's a chapter. This woman is amazing. And she got really into the fact that he was going cross country and stuff like that. And I thought, he's not going to succeed as a memoirist because he doesn't see where he's not thinking of the reader. And this was a wonderful character. I love this character. I mean, he only did about one paragraph on her, but I said, oh, no, she's a whole chapter. But
where'd you develop your eye for that? For like, where'd you get your ideas? Like, I'm going to add a crocodile here, or this character that one author thinks is random. You say, no, that's a character. How'd you develop your eye for things like that?
I think I think about my character before I put them in the story. I develop an ear for a character. I know one story I wrote is I had this woman's style of speaking in my head before I wrote, and then I had to figure out what scene to put her in. So I put her in an old Southern situation. I think because I'm so character driven, I hear the voice, and which is sometimes annoying because I can't unhear that voice. And I do put a lot of time and effort into. And the other thing I can do that might be useful is I'm doing a major re-edit on a piece right now, and rather than get caught into the original story, because I really think it needs a 50% rewrite, I'm writing scenes separate, so I can immerse myself in that scene, and when I've got them, I will then go back and see how I can put them in. Otherwise, I find I get caught. I get caught by my original story, which is often a story I'm telling myself rather than something that should be published. It's just I'm trying to create something on the paper. So anyway.
Well, let's move on to our next segment, marketing and monetization methods, where we talk about how to monetize your creativity and different ways of either finding funding or doing traditional businesses. So I am curious, how have you made money as a creator? What have been your different income streams?
It's interesting. I thought about this, and I had a phone call with my son, and we were talking about this, and I said, I think, everybody wants to be, the Stephen King or the Oprah Winfrey. These people who are just larger than larger than larger. And I said, that's kind of, and my son said, well, think about the NFL. How many people play football? And what 0.001% get into a professional situation? So to be in the creative field, and again, it's academics, all creativity, I think needs some sort of an institutional support. And if you can't get within an institution, for example, in the University of Davis, all of they have an MFA program, and usually they don't have PhDs, but they are writers, which is what they should be for teaching writing. and they are they are supporting themselves institutionally. Their lifestyles would be very different if, even though they're published authors. And we had somebody who came in from Montana, and her husband is also, he was a Stegner Fellow, and she was a Stegner Fellow at Stanford, which is, I mean, I got to bow to that. When you say that, I'm in awe automatically. It's that, and the Iowa Writers' Schools are just like guaranteed amazing writers. And he is a tree pruner now. That's what he does for a living. And I have a brother-in-law who lives in London, and he is an artist. And until he got a job teaching at Morley College in London, he wanted to do his art. So he was taking
Mhm.
care of a autistic boy so that he could do his art. And I thought a lot about what you, and my current mentor, who Samin Ali, I talked to her a little bit about this because she is making a living. Her husband also works, but she is making a living as an author. And I think that you, if you're not going to have an institution, if you're going to make money, then you have got to create the environment you want, where
Mhm.
you can get people coming to you. And the person that when I first started writing, that I worked with, I realized in retrospect she wasn't a super good mentor, but I wasn't a super good writer either. So it gave me time. And she really, I think, she put out 2 books, and I think published 2 books, and I think that she really tried. But the ambiguity of having to find your own students and set up these courses and things like that. And I noticed that she's eventually taken a job that she's not happy with, but
Mhm.
sometimes the rent is due. And so Samina Ali, she has a Stanford institution to back her. I'm hoping, for example, I'm having somebody create a web page for my children's books, just uniquely for it. This designed for agents and publishing houses, just completely the children's component. And I'm hoping, for example, that the stories on stage, which I did not do for monetary reasons, but the creation of stories on stage, when you want to get published, they want to know. They don't do as much support as they used to. They want you to
Mhm.
do it. They want you to go out and understand the world you're trying to get into. So I'm hoping that the 10-year affiliation with Stories on Stage um, will hopefully help on the children's books, even though we've never presented a children's book. But the idea that I understand what you're talking about. Do you understand how to get in, how to go and self promote, things like that? Do you know how to become a part of the writing community, which is the actual reason I started Stories on Stage? I think you have to think of yourself as a writer to be a writer.
Yeah.
And that was
Yeah,
part of
and
stepping into the
there's
forum.
something I want to clarify because each writer comes to a fork in the road. Do I self publish or do I seek an agent and a publisher? And it sounds to me, and based on my research for the show, that you went the traditional publishing route. Is that correct?
Right, right. But let me add, it used to be, my observation used to be, and of course there's a little ego involved. It's nice to say somebody else wants to take a risk on you.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not as anti self publishing as I used to be. I used to be a little bit against it, only because I thought people didn't do the hard work. They went and self published before they really had done enough work. And so they were putting less than perfect stuff out. And I mean, no book's perfect, but you know what I mean. That they weren't
Yes.
investing in the process and the learning and the just darn hard work that anybody who writes knows that writing is. And so they were publishing too soon. I think now I'm not as against it as I used to be. I've seen some good writers go to the self-publishing route.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the point of creating my new webpage that should hopefully be up in a couple of months, is I'm going to make a real run at it. And then if I don't get anything, I will publish these books myself because I think they're good. I have 2 books that are completed. Actually, yeah, 2 books that are completed. They're illustrated and everything. I think if you self-publish, you do have a lot of work
Mm-hmm.
to do on your own. And it can be very daunting when one of our directors at Stories on Stage got a 2-book publication right off the bat, which for her first book, and they gave her a retainer for the second book. So that's a pretty strong compliment. And she would go to give talks on her book, and there'd be nobody there, or there'd be like 5 people, and it can be kind of exhausting. And I've noticed people are kind of pairing up now so that they have a little support, because it can be quite exhausting. I think that's why we get good authors, because we have a great audiences. We put a lot of work into getting those audiences. We have great audiences, and so they're guaranteed there's going to be people listening to them, their book.
Yeah.
And but I think I was quite intrigued. I think the turning point for me on self-publishing was, don't know the guy's name. I've never read his book, but he is an English, very intellectual detective. And the
Mhm.
writer is an English writer. And apparently, I don't know, I'm making this up. I think he's written like 25 books. I mean, it's up there, number of books.
Yeah.
And I was watching him being interviewed, and the guy was saying, well, except for Harry Potter, you are the most pre-ordered book. And does that cut down on your having to go around and sell yourself? And he says, I'm on your program. And I thought, oh my gosh, even he has to go out and sell himself. So you can imagine how well, certainly me, I'll speak for myself, how much work goes into it. And you go to coffee shops and, anyway, it's grinding work that is in my opinion, the hard part of writing is selling your book.
Yeah.
It's so. I mean, we all want to be a Harry Potter,
Yeah.
but for example, I think she got turned down for. I'm going to make this up, but I think it was around 20. Hunt the Red October, which was an international bestseller, got turned down by every single publishing company. Beautifully written book, and finally, then he sent it as a joke to the Navy, and the Navy went, "This is an amazing book," and they published it. And
Yeah. And
I mean, these were people who succeeded. And I think everybody should, if collect these stories and have them around where they write, people, how many times they got rejected, that sort of thing. I mean, really actively collect it so you don't feel so badly. In one of my critique groups, for example, one of them is very well published, and this year has been a dry year for her, and she's just like, "Arr." And I'd always go, I'm so sorry for you, but oh my gosh, you give my heart a lift if you are having a dry year, and you're such an
yeah.
amazing writer. And that's the reality. And so you got to do it because you want to do it. It's important for you to do it. And I write to publish. I think otherwise it's just you're fooling yourself. I write to publish. I think you should write to
Mhm.
publish, but don't assume it'll happen.
Let me ask you this. How do you stay motivated with the rejection? And even if you don't get rejected, say you get published, you still have to promote the book. And like you were saying,
I
that's
know.
hard work. But
It
with
is hard
all
work.
that work involved and rejection, how do you stay motivated to keep going?
I think every job has its downsides. I did lose my mojo about 6 months ago, and it wasn't that a particular piece I thought was good. It got honorable mentions in Glimmer Train before they stopped being published, which is quite an honor. It got presented uh, at some event, and it's not been published yet.
Mhm.
And I kind of went through, but then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, I need to. I think I do need to change some things in it. And so I've done that, and and so I just said, okay, I'm just not going to send anything out until I've got this where I think, and I got a couple of wows over comments. And so now I've sent it out. Haven't had any rejections yet. So I'm in a good mood. And that's where you have to dig deep. You really have to dig deep. And again, the habit, the habit.
Mhm.
And I think the other thing you can do when you get discouraged is my critique group. We meet every 2 weeks, and there's just 3 of us. It's a pretty strong group, and there's 3 of us. And it's not that like last time I didn't present anything. There's that pressure. So I believe in putting myself in what I call thinking of putting myself in front of a machine gun. I can go faster than these bullets. And by putting yourself in harm's way, you get a little bit of an urgency that keeps you going, and you set that routine. Just set that routine.
How do you make sure when there's a task that doesn't want to get done, but it needs to get done regularly? How do you make sure it gets done?
I don't know if you can see, but this is my list. And notice I square off things that need to be done. And I go one, two, three. And then next to something like read. I mean, how do you define reading? So I'd do one, two, three, four, working on a particular, the story I'm re-editing, one, two, three, four, five. And then I'll cross it off. And
Mm-hmm.
that way I stay accountable to myself. I think you can fool yourself if you don't have it in black and white. I've gone, at one point, I was actually using a calendar, but it got too messy. But a paper calendar
Mm-hmm.
where you actually put an X on the days. When I go to my office, I will, if I'm feeling lazy, I'll say, okay, I gotta keep my butt in the chair for an hour, and I'll write down what time I started. And even if I sit there accomplishing remarkably little, I've got that sense of accomplishment. And I've done it long enough now that I don't have to time myself anymore. I just sit down and work until I'm not being successful. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just hard, That's why, again, going back to the Nike, if you want to run 2 miles, well, and you can't do it, well, walk a mile. Just do it, and
Yeah.
eventually you'll get bored enough. You'll start doing a little jog, and then you'll walk again, then you'll jog, and pretty soon you're running the whole time. And it just builds over
Yeah.
time.
So little by little.
Yep, yep. And I think this is the thing. Splash working. Like I said, this one guy said he wrote for 4 hours. I don't think there's a chance I could write that long. I don't, not a chance. I can't believe even he could
Yeah.
write that long. But I believe him. I believe him. He's very successful, so obviously he knows what he's doing. And I think the other thing for people who want to be writers to realize is my son is actually a professor at Stanford, and he hit a home run on his thesis. Still didn't know if he was going to go academics, so he did he actually got his degree at Stanford. Then he went to Harvard for a postdoc, and he hit another home run. I mean, major home run, which got him back to Stanford as a professor. And he still, he has to raise money now. There's different components. You've got to stay dedicated. So even though he hit home runs, two of them, enough to get him into Stanford he's a assistant professor. He's new. He still has obstacles. They don't go away. But he loves science, and if you love writing, you'll have obstacles even if you succeed.
Actually, that's key. I want to repeat that. Even if you succeed, you'll have obstacles. There will always be more obstacles. So you have to love the thing and stick to it. You have to love it enough to stick to it because there will always be
Yeah,
obstacles, even in
yeah,
success.
yes, yes, yes. Have any
Yeah,
other
and
ideas?
I want to go back to something you said too earlier because it's worth repeating. So we already have if you have success, there will still be obstacles. So you have to love the thing and stick to the thing. But let's go back to before you succeed. You were saying just do it. And for example, let's take running. If you can't run 2 miles, walk 2 miles. If you can't walk 2 miles, walk a mile and keep building on it until you get there. You kind of brush past that, but I thought that was genius. But just do it. And if you can't do the full do something and keep building
Yes,
upon it.
yes. And if you have a job and young kids, it takes energy to be creative.
Yes.
And I think that I've noticed since I've retired, my creativity in terms of writing has gone up because I have brain power to.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think of myself when I was working as a mental athlete, and I'd go on holidays and I'd go, "Oh my gosh, my brain is working better," and it was because I had time to think, rather than just going, "Oh my god, I got to deal with that. I got to deal with that. Got to any." And so I think that you need to be realistic about your writing, but even if you only have 10, 15 minutes, make it sacrosanct.
Yeah.
When you're in your particular place, and I do think place is important to have a particular place where, and how you, that little ritual component, to at least this is what I've learned from listening to other authors, that little ritual component, your brain just funnels down into the idea of writing. And cut yourself some slack if you've had a hellacious day. make that 10-15 minutes just reading. But you sat
Yeah.
down. You said, this is important to me. I'm going to dedicate this time to it. And realize that if you keep going, there'll be times, kids aren't in diapers forever, it turns out. So there'll be a time when they'll be glad to have them, working away somewhere out of their
Yeah,
hair.
and then even with you, day jobs aren't forever either. A lot of people are saddled with day jobs. You had a whole career in academic writing and research, but now you're retired, so you have more brain power and more time. So the time does eventually come for most
Yeah.
things.
And the other thing that's interesting that I've noticed since I've retired is I used to be able to go down a page of math arguments, just dragging my finger down it. I got to write it
Hmm.
out now. Not that I look at math very much anymore, but I have to write it out now. I'm not the mental
Yeah.
athlete I was, but I think my choice of thinking about words and things, a different part of my brain is being used. And so I think that's maybe the physiology of how the brain works is if you keep using the same pathway. For example, baseball players, they hit the ball, 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 and basically they're training neural pathways.
Yes.
And you listen to them talk about, or people who kick balls in football, you listen to what they're saying, and they're not focused on where their leg is. They're focused on something else. They're intellectually looking at what they're doing. And what they've done is they've trained the neural circuits. And I think that's why doing a little bit every day of something that's important to you, and I don't care if it's knitting or quilting or whatever, something that's important to you, doing it every day is it keeps those neural circuits built up. I mean, literally, they can see a density increase if you're using certain pathways all the time. And they
Yeah,
actually,
and I actually like
you
how
know,
you explained that because so many other people say write every day just because that's what the habit gurus say, and you have to mark your calendar and don't break the chain, and you have to do it because you have to do it, or just this kind of, I mean, it is discipline, but this grind energy, like you just have to do it. But I like neuroscience, I really do, and I like how you explained that you're building neural pathways. And
yeah,
I like mental athlete how you explain it. So that is why you want to, whether it's write or speak or make videos or whatever your thing is, graphic design, you want to do it, almost every day or as close to every day as you
right.
can to build the muscle memory and the neural pathways is very important.
Yeah, I really think, because like I said, I'm convinced that my brain is working in between writing. Because I'll go back and I was stumped. I didn't know how to handle that. And I go back the next day and I go, ooh, I think I have an idea how to solve that problem. And,
Yeah.
I didn't think I was thinking, like, when I'm watching Judge Judy, I'm sure not thinking about my writing.
Yeah.
Something was continued to work in between
Yeah.
my writing time and my downtime.
I'm going to go into the last segment, going deeper, where we get to know you on a deeper, more human level. I want to get back to Stories on Stage Davis, because that looks amazing. That's actually how we met. One of our first conversations is you were telling me about your Stories on Stage Davis. So I want to know what inspired you to get that started. And if you can walk me through your process of ideation. Okay, I have this idea. I want to do stories on stage. How did that come to be? And then how did you make it to your first event? What did you have to do to get that?
That's an interesting, yeah. Being in a university, the English department I noticed that they'd had a particular author I would have been interested to see, but obviously they weren't reaching out to the community, which is, I mean, where the university ends and the town begins is almost the same. And I thought, oh, goodness gracious, I think this town would love to have an event where the author comes, and usually the author reads. And quite often the author is not good. So I thought, okay, I'll think about hiring actors. And I got it was only a $2,000 grant, but it was a grant from just to get started. And I had decided that it had to be in one of our local art galleries, because I think that where you have an event is part of the experience. And then the
Mm-hmm.
biggest thing, and this is the biggest thing, with the kindness of their souls and their hearts, people would discourage me. Oh, and
Huh.
the concept of failure. And to me, I'd go, well, what's the bottom line? I mean, nobody's going to come out and, run me down with a car because I didn't get the thing successfully off the ground. What can go wrong? I mean, if you're silly, things can go wrong. But given I've got a lot of experience getting things off the ground, and I did believe in myself. But on the first day, this was just a private thing I did for myself. I asked one person. I said, "I'd like you to stand up," and it was a minor friend. And I said, "I want to thank you. You're the one person who says I think you can do this." Mm-hmm. And people with the best, really, really, who care deeply for you, will try to be discouraging. And that's why I think that's the secret of my success, I think, is that I've gotten many things off the ground because I analyze what the bottom line is. If it doesn't work, what are the consequences? And then I just pull my ego out and just do, kind of what we're talking about. Just do the hard grinding work. And eventually the Pence Art Gallery, which is where we hold the event, I remember I was in an airplane going somewhere, and I called and I said, "I need to decide, will you have the event? Will you let us have the event on the second Saturday of every month?" And she goes, "Oh, I was just going to call you." Yes. And that's when I knew it was going to take off, because I had made the decision that it was that art gallery or not. And then just a lot of hard work. And then what happens is pretty soon you build a reputation, and then everybody wants on board. And so, I'm a little like, everybody thinks we are a success, but everybody, oh yeah. And we just got a $15,000 grant from the city, and everybody's, oh my gosh, and I'm like, oh, well, nobody helped us in the beginning. And I don't mean that in a mean way, but I think it's a practical thing. Success, people are interested in seeing success. And then what happens is it's gotten much easier. We actually have authors that approach us now. Not probably about a quarter of our authors approach us. And so that makes life easier. And the average life expectancy of a director is 3 years. So I end up having to do a little bit more work as we transition. But we've got new directors now, and they're really good. So I'm mostly doing just reading and finding the authors.
Nice. And how do you find the actors?
We have a casting director. What do I know about actors? Nothing. And so we have a casting director who, because you can't have an old man reading a young man's story. He's got to mix them, and he's very protective of his area. And I will, if I have an author and I'm having to decide between three that said yes, and I'm having to decide between three stories, because sometimes we'll modify a story to fit the time frame with author. Mm-hmm. But I'll go, okay, if we can get so-and-so or so-and-so, I'll choose this. If we can't, then I have to choose a different piece, because some pieces are, this poor one actress, she's very good. She's very good. Her name is Kelly, and she runs a theater, and she loves us. And I said, and I told her I did this. She says, yeah, you give me the hardest pieces to read. I said, I know you'll do a great job. And she does. And so the casting director is really important. It's really important. And every once in a while, I think he's probably made 2 miscasts. And one was a radio personality. We didn't know she wouldn't. On radio, she's great. She's a KVIE, or which is, the educational radio talk show. And she's a regular on it. She seems to be fast on her feet. But I guess reading, you can't really, you change the punctuation. As an actor, you change the punctuation.
Yeah.
Draw things out there. The master of punctuation is my thing. What they bring is unbelievable, because I'll read these stories and then I'll see what the actor brings to it. And it's like, oh my gosh. Even the authors. I used to ask the authors what they thought when I was the director, and they go, oh, I didn't know my piece was that funny. Oh, I'm going to change how I read my own work. And like I said, I think in we have 20 authors a year. And I think that he's only dropped the ball twice. And one was a person what I would have expected to work. So I only give bad credit for one.
Yeah, that's a pretty good batting average. 98%, something like that.
Yeah, the actor didn't work. And I don't know why.
Yeah, very exciting. And I love that it's in an art gallery. I love art museums and art galleries. So I could just imagine going to like a live event, like surrounded by art. And this seems to be a theme with you, place. Like you were saying, the place that you hosted it matters, but also the place that you write matters. If a writer carves out a certain place for their writing. So place and setting, I guess it triggers the brain and adds to the experience. It matters.
Yeah, it does, and it's lovely, and the art in this gallery changes pretty much monthly. So I usually go early and I'll run upstairs and look and see what they've got, and you know direct our people while they're milling around to go upstairs. There's some really interesting stuff in that room on the right. So it gives them a
Yeah,
full experience.
as I got to know you, for those who don't know, in a forum called the Workshop, a writers forum. You have this philosophy that you've stuck to since I've known you, to chip away at things little by little. Like if you are a runner to me, you're not a sprinter. You are a marathon runner. You pace yourself, or I just picture you like, and I mean this in a great way, like an ant, how ants, they just
Mm-hmm.
move and they work little by little. So where'd you discover this philosophy? Why do you work that way? And how's that work for you?
First of all, I love doing. I absolutely enjoy doing, and I think the secret to mankind's success is doing stuff. But we also want to succeed. And when I find that, if I think my husband was a little involved I used to get grand ideas, and some of them would work and some of them wouldn't. And I think, over time, he's the one who got me to not think about the grand idea. I mean, the end result you want, but to focus more on the process of getting there. And then it's when something succeeds, you tend to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I ended up with that philosophy, is that, and you have to apply intelligence to it. I mean, you don't just sit there and I'm going to sit here for 15 minutes every day. I mean, you have to actually think about what you're doing, but just crawl on your hands and knees. I agree. You know what an ant can move? Have you ever seen the
Yeah.
ant mounds in Africa? I was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot for these little tiny creatures.
Yeah. But they get it done.
They get it done. Yep. Yep. One little grain of sand at a time. Sounds corny. It's
Nice.
true.
All right. Knowing what you know now as an author and creator, is there anything you would have done differently on your journey, knowing what you know now?
I don't know if I believe in looking backwards. I think each journey
Yeah.
takes you where it, fits in, clicks in. I think my science background really came in handy, from the discipline, from the understanding of the amount of work that goes into creativity. If I had started out in literature, I don't know if would have had the perseverance. And so I just think that
Hmm.
life, I'm a half full, the glass is half full kind of person, versus the glass
Yeah.
is half empty. And I think if you can keep yourself thinking half full, then you'll enjoy whatever it is you're doing and you won't regret things, and just use them as learning experiences. And I think that if you have an
Yeah.
experience, you discover who you are. I mean, I don't think disasters create heroes. I think it shows who the heroes are. And so I think that, no, I have no regrets for anything. And life is a source of inspiration.
Yeah. And what has been the greatest lesson you've learned along the way?
To believe in myself.
Yeah.
That sounds trite and trivial, but um, you just have to believe you can do it and put the energy in. And I mean, I have a 3-acre English country garden, which is almost at my limit. And, people go, oh my gosh, how do you do this? And I go, oh, you just go out, and there's always a place where you turn and I go, oh, I can't look at that. Oh, no, 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 no. Somebody quick torch it. But, it's a dramatically interesting garden. And you just go out and you have to enjoy it. My brother comes out and he goes, oh, I don't know how you can stand it. You just finish one thing, you have to go to the next thing. I said, but I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And occasionally I'll look at it with a jaundiced eye and go, oh my gosh. But then I'll let weeds fall over. And I actually have weeds in certain sections that are very attractive. And I'll let them stay there until they think they're going to spread seeds. And then I'll yank their little heads off. Um, you know, so
Yeah, and that's something, that's another thread for you. Just do it as a thread and just enjoying everything, just not having regrets and just bringing joy, whether it's the gardening, the writing, the watching Judge Judy. I just love how you bring joy to everything.
watch Judge Judy. It's not true. I do.
Is there a personality trait or a habit you would like to develop? Or if there was any personality trait or habit you could develop, what would it be?
To develop or undevelop.
To develop.
I'm a problem solver, and that is that. Some people I've discovered don't want the problem solved, so I'm trying to not
Oh,
solve problems so
undeveloped.
much. Yeah, I don't know. I suddenly realized, oh, so and so doesn't really wants to be in this mess they're in. They don't want to see their way out. Um, no, because I accept myself.
Yeah.
I mean, there were times when I felt badly about myself. I mean, I think we all do. But I think when I was 30, there was a gal, and I was horseback riding at that time. And there was a gal, and she was, and I admired her a lot. I still do. And she was waxing on and on about riding. And I was listening to her, and I thought, you don't know how to ride. You're just making this up as you go along. And and that's when I suddenly realized, oh, wait a minute. Some people toot their own horn a little louder than maybe they should. And before I used to believe him, and I go, oh my gosh, I don't downhill slalom race and do marathons and fly airplanes and all this tremendous. I mean, there are occasionally some people who actually are true, amazing, but I realize that a lot of people blow it up bigger than it is, and if I think I came to accept that on the average, I think of myself as pretty good, and there's always somebody better on every component of my life. There'll be somebody I'll run into who's better at it, and that's okay. I just think
Yeah.
I think of myself as a medium well person. I've met really exceptional, well done people. I mean, I used to work with this gal who, oh my gosh, she was a genius. And she and I studied together, and I go, oh my gosh. And she said, oh, when I work with you, I don't have to study anymore. And I go, you're kidding. I have to go home and spend hours and hours reviewing what we were talking about. She says, oh no. And I thought, I'll never be like that person. It's just, I mean, she is a genius. And then I thought, oh, but wait, she likes working with me because I put the energy into it and save
Yeah.
the time having to put more energy in. And so I think that's where I just realized, you know, I'm happy with myself. I'm contented.
Yeah.
I'm contented. I think
Yeah.
that's a wonderful, wonderful feeling.
That is a wonderful feeling and an accomplishment that's so rare. I don't see it. I don't see it often. That's great.
Well, I am getting older, and that helps a little bit. You get a little life lessons going. I think there's a time where your ambitions are very strong and you're willing to sacrifice maybe things you shouldn't for those ambitions or the demands. I mean, having a job, having children, things like that are very demanding, very, very demanding. And then there's a period when you get a little bit older where contentment, if you work at it and have laid the groundwork, I think contentment is one of the payoffs. That and mentoring. I love mentoring. That's one of the payoffs of
Yeah.
getting older, is being able to help others achieve their goals.
Well, let's go to the close of the show.
Okay.
So we have learned so much from you, Jeri. Thank you for having us. If people want more Jeri Howitt, where would they find you? Like,
Okay.
where are your books at? Where's your website?
I'm having a new web page built. There is an old web page, but it won't be done. I think realistically till the end of February. But I'll give you my email address. It's all lowercase. Jeri Howitt.
Mm-hmm.
JeriHowitt at Gmail. So JeriHowitt at Gmail. And as I say, one of the joys of older age is mentoring. So
Yeah.
I mean, I can't be swamped, but, I'd love to share or help people out if I can, if it's within something I can offer.
Awesome. If you have questions for Jeri, don't hound her. Do your own research first. Don't ask her questions Google can answer. But if you have questions for Jeri, go ahead and email her. She's been generous. And this won't air for a while, so your website may be up by then. If it is, I
Oh, that's
will
true.
include the
And that will
link.
be
Yeah,
jerihowitt.com.
awesome. And people can check out your books. All right. And if you want to find more of me, please subscribe wherever you're listening to this. YouTube, please like and subscribe. It helps me out. Listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. It helps more people discover the show and helps the algorithm deliver you more stuff you want to. Thank you. Bye, Creator Kings and Queens. Till next time.